Good evening, church. Due to an ongoing level 2 snow emergency, we made the difficult decision to cancel our in-person services this evening. And we would like to present to you instead with a playlist, both of new and old content to enjoy from the comfort of your warm homes. So please be sure to watch Angie's sermon, which she would have presented in person this evening. And feel free to visit a few of our other Christmas Eve services and Christmas concert from years past. And we also encourage you to share this playlist with your family and friends. And may it warm your spirits and bring peace and joy and love and hope to you this evening. Amen.
We are the waiting ones, longing for the day to come when we are no longer waiting on the one who can save us from ourselves. Waiting with bated breath for hope to reach out its hand from heaven and heal our helpless hearts. Waiting for a light to spark, a light to dawn, a light to diffuse the dark we'd drawn like curtains over our souls. Waiting for the promise to unfold like a map leading us to the treasure of treasures so we can behold and believe. Waiting for peace to supersede our anxieties and flow like a river through a dry and weary land where there is no water. Waiting for the Father to see fit to find us in our pit, pining in our sin, the spiritual slum we lived in. But when the fullness of time had come, He sent forth His only Son, incarnate one, the manifestation of God in the flesh, the epitome of a promise kept. He left heaven's majesty so we no longer have to be waiting. The birth of a baby, a king, come to redeem the world He created. God, born in a borrowed stable, the light of man in a makeshift cradle. This is not a fable. The one whom we have waited for is here. Peer into the manger and behold Him who welcomes the stranger and breaks the chains of every captive. Our Maker, our Savior, our Master is here, casting our fear into the ocean of His love. Emmanuel, God with us. Go shout it on the mountain, 'cause our waiting is done.
Well, friends, I have to admit this is not how I expected to be preaching on Christmas Eve for the first time. Since we have decided to take greater safety precautions and ask that everyone stays home and warm tonight, I am recording from my study at home, which means you will probably hear my dogs barking at some point or another. So please forgive them in advance and know that they are making the night here indoors just a little happier. With that said, let's go ahead and get to the sermon for tonight. Friends, will you pray with me? Almighty God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable and pleasing in your sight. For you, O God, are our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. So one of my favorite aspects of Christmas Eve is candlelight. For as long as I can remember, candles have played a role, whether in the form of early strands of tree lights that looked like oil candles, or electric light bulb candles that we plugged in each night, illuminating the windows of my childhood homes. In more recent years, it's been the beauty of luminaries throughout neighborhoods and spaces such as these, where we share the light of the Christ candle, which we would normally do if gathered together. Of course, I burn candles on a regular basis, but there's something extra special about having candles cast their soft, warm flicker in the spaces that surround each of us tonight. I imagine that while candlelight is a secondary source of light for most of us, luxury rather than a necessity, in controlled settings, its ambiance offers a sense of peace. Nearly 2,000 years ago, of course, it would have been the means by which Mary, Joseph, and any number of farm or domesticated animals first caught a glimpse of the true light of the world as he drew his first breath. Christmas Eve, the night on which we celebrate the birth of baby Jesus, Emmanuel, God with us, is a light in the midst of what those of us in colder climates experience as a season that all too often feels just a little more dim. Tonight, of course, is the culmination of a season of waiting, the season the church calls Advent. And it has been an exercise in anticipating all that can and should be right with humanity, and indeed with all of creation. We've been waiting for God to show up and make all right, all while remembering that all along God was and still is showing up. Throughout the past 4 weeks, we have been on a journey to explore what it looks like and what it means to reflect the sacred in and through our own lives. Now, by the ways of dictionary definitions, to reflect something means to throw something back without absorbing it. But ours isn't a journey that is simply about reflecting or remaining unchanged as a mirror might. It is a journey that is both a call to action and a sort of how-to. And in every sense, the end of this journey, this very night, is also the beginning. Well, just a couple of weeks ago, we heard the words of Mary's song of praise, the Magnificat, in which the young unwed mother-to-be proclaimed that God had already done the work of uplifting the lowly and toppling the mighty. All of this from the knowledge that in her womb, a child, God's own self, was coming to show us God in a new way. Not as in the veil of a temple or in the graven images of some cultures, but in the sacred being of flesh and bone. And she gave birth to her firstborn son and wrapped him in bands of cloth and laid him in a manger because there was no room for them in the inn. The sacred being of tiny toes, fingerprints, wisps of hair, a snotty nose, and a colicky cough. The sacred being of needing food and rest, of learning to move about the world as our bodies are able. The sacred being of learning to speak, to read, a bit remarkable for the time, how to make friends, the pains of adolescence, the sacred being of everything that makes being human awkward or difficult or even painful. So what does it mean for all of us that for all the ways that God could have chosen to cast off the most miserable or mundane parts of being, God chose to do it anyway? It means that God believed us worth all of it. In for a penny, in for a pound. For all of our faults and shortcomings, God chose to be with us and be us. Not because we deserved it or that we were on God's nice list, but simply because God made us just to love us. Simply being is one way we reflect the sacred nature of God. Human bodies are love poured out. God's very being is our DNA. In his book, The Universal Christ, Father Richard Ward reminds us that the light of the world is a phrase that is used to describe the Christ in John chapter 8, verse 12. But have you ever noticed that Jesus also applies the same phrase to us in Matthew 5:14, when he says, "You are the light of the world"? It is more than theological pondering that drives our presence as a gathered community tonight in this virtual space. We are people called to be the body of Christ, and it is a moniker that we take on willingly. And in part of our regular worship, we take in the bread and the cup, which become for us the body and blood of the risen Christ. And in this sense, we are the body of Christ in practice as well as by the name we claim. So can we allow ourselves to extend this sacred connection one step further and see that for all the ways that we are an outpouring of God's love, we are also the baby born among the animals on that most holy night so long ago. Jesus himself imparts to us his own sacred nature. We are the baby in need of being wrapped in love, nourished in body, mind, and soul, and comforted in times of uncertainty and hardship. And for that matter, we are also the praise of Mary, the heart of God, loving and moving throughout the world, embodying the ways of living that reflect the sacred and divine light of God that is us and is in us. We are the body of Christ, the shining light that offers direction and warmth and presence, particularly as we find ourselves responding to the needs of others, to love our neighbor, to feed and clothe, to comfort the distressed and the grieving. All of these are how God loved us through Jesus and how God continues to love humanity through this body now. But let us remember that the sacred isn't only being the one or ones called to tend to such needs. Our Lord reminds us that sacred is found in places of dirt and squalor, in families with and without notable lineage, in backwoods places such as Nazareth and Bethlehem and literal Timbuktu. Nowhere near as cosmopolitan as Jerusalem or Hollywood or even Columbus, Ohio. God's sacred being sits on interstate off-ramps tonight. It sits in gilded golf resorts in Florida and on the wrong side of a thick concrete wall that separates present-day Bethlehem into free citizens and restricted inhabitants. The sacred is all around us, even and especially when we cannot allow ourselves to see it or feel it or be it. Now, on a standard Christmas Eve, we would be mere minutes from preparing to share the light from the Christ candle. It's a tangible way of reminding ourselves that we receive and take into the world the light of the Christ child, whose birth we celebrate tonight. And although in those spaces we physically extinguish our candles before leaving the space, the sacred task of being the bearer of light remains. Reflect God's sacred light, but not in the way of hard, unchanging mirror, but rather as the still surface of a pond. Because there is plenty of sacred light to be shared. Send some out to others. Allow some to reach beyond the surface where it warms and gives light where needed. Allow the light to change your own view as it bounces around and shows you new realities. This is the night, friends. The babe is on his way. The fullness of God's love and desire for us, God's own light, is coming into the world, still and once again. The end of the waiting is the beginning of everything changing. His flesh not yet free of vernix from the last few months spent inside of his mother's womb, he will be wrapped in swaddling clothes, resting his fragile body outside the margins of proper society. His entrance just as fraught with danger as any other, as jarring and bare as Moses's or David's, or Pilate's or Judas's or yours or mine. And still, we remember that God chose to make human flesh a divine home. The babe is here, and in him the sacred light is spreading to all who need it. The light is come. Glory to God in the highest heaven, and who on earth does dwell. Amen.